Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of the Game Junkie Show, and I'm here with some awesome friends. I've got Julia joining us, Matt,
Hello.
and Wesley.
Hi, Crystal.
And I'm actually super excited about this topic. This was Julia's idea, and what we're going to talk about today is gaming difficulty. So since this was your topic, I think we should let you kick it off, but tell us your thoughts on should games have difficulty settings, difficulty sliders, and tell us why.
So while I agree that some games should have a difficulty setting, there are some that I don't think should have it at all. Because you have some games that its whole point is to be challenge based. So you have games like Dark Souls, you have games like Bloodborne or Neo, or any of those challenge-based games. If you take the challenge out of it, it defeats the purpose of the experience that you're meant to have. So while I think that games should be accessible to everyone, and I think that everyone should be able to pick up a game like Dark Souls or Bloodborne or Neo or any of those really challenging games, or Returnal, the newest one that came out that's really difficult, I think that it's also important to respect the original vision of how the game was intended to be played.
Dude, that was so perfectly said. I think we can all go home. I don't.
Hi.
Bye.
Yeah. So Wesley, what do you to kind of piggyback off that? What do you think?
I mean, I personally agree with pretty much everything that Crystal, that Julia mentioned. I do think that there are some games that are just built to be played and for the player to be challenged by. And I know that a lot of people complain about that. They complain that that's, almost like a form of gatekeeping in a way, because people want them to be challenging. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think a lot of people will mix up they'll throw in the term accessibility when what they're really talking about is challenge. And I think that a lot of people kind of they automatically go to the challenge aspect, but they bring up accessibility in these kind of games, and the accessibility factor is a completely different topic. When you talk about accessibility, you're really talking about the ability of people to play the game, right? So people with certain challenges that can't play the game, whether they're visually impaired somehow, or they're hearing impaired, or impaired in some other way, and they can't easily play the game the same as somebody else that it doesn't have those kinds of challenges. So I think that too often people kind of mix those things up. But really, if you're talking about a challenging game, if you're not impaired in that way, there's nothing stopping you from spending the time to increase your skills and get better at the game. It may take longer than somebody that's maybe more naturally gifted at that type of game, but I think if you're really invested and you really want to see the content in those games, and you want to play the game that badly, there's nothing stopping you from necessarily spending the time and increasing your ability.
Matt, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say maybe just only speaking for myself. I think I definitely agree that some games were perhaps designed to be without difficulty settings, like Returnal or FromSoft games. But I would generally say that I like when there's difficulty settings. I also would say that I like when there's no achievements or trophies tied to difficulty settings, because I think that would make me not want to get a platinum if that's the case, or just make it harder. And I would say that that's a great point that you brought up there, Wes, about confusing accessibility with difficulty setting. Actually, when I came into this conversation, I was actually thinking about making difficulty settings, they make games more accessible. But I think that's a great distinction that you made there, and I think it's when you think of accessibility in that way that you mentioned, I think that's like what The Last of Us 2 nailed with
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And then but with Returnal, I don't think it's one that's like a mainstream audience can really absorb if you're just maybe more of a casual gamer, or you just don't have the time to devote to really getting good at it, or like because I mean, specifically for myself, I have Returnal, and I think it's just kind of frustrating. And I play it and I play it and I just keep dying over and over again. And I know that's kind of the point of it, is you're supposed to just keep dying in it. But I like one thing that I can't get over is how the map keeps changing every time, and I just want to get to Frike again. I just want to get to him and so I can try to beat him again. And I can't, like, every time I prepare for the for the fight, I get the assault rifle, I get the astronaut figurine, but then all of a sudden I'm getting wiped out in every challenge room, every preceding area to get to him. And then when all of a sudden it randomly loads where he's like the very next room, I'm not prepared. I get my butt kicked, and then I'm just frustrated. And I would say that generally, I play games to relax and unwind after a long day of work. And I just sometimes just don't really want to, devote the time to only play it one way. Like, speaking of which, like The Witcher 3, I thought the combat was kind of sometimes unnecessarily difficult. So I'm not ashamed to say that I beat that on easy. And I enjoyed it far more, I would say. I was able to enjoy the story. I was able to just be really good at the combat. And then when I felt comfortable, I upped it. I was able to play it on normal. And other games like Spider-Man, for instance, like ultimate difficulty, I think that's a breeze now because I've been playing it so long. And like I've just I did a New Game Plus playthrough with ultimate difficulty, and I did it, just on the side. I did it all in the Sam Raimi suit, so that was awesome. It was like, the Spider-Man 4 we never got. But generally, I would say that I think it's good to have difficulty settings, and when the game wasn't envisioned to be without it, I would say. I think From Software, they let them design the games however they want. They do a fantastic job. But I would say that generally, I'm a fan of the difficulty settings, and it's more just comes down to I don't play games to get frustrated. I play games to have fun and relax.
Yeah, I think that it depends on the game in a lot of ways. Like, I think that there's certain genres that maybe lend themselves to, or types of games that lend themselves to difficulty settings that make more sense than maybe some others. When you're talking about, excuse me, like really gameplay heavy games that maybe don't have quite as much emphasis on storyline and that type of thing, I think that maybe it's probably less critical to be concerned with something like that, because generally what you play is what you get in a lot of cases. But if you're talking about something that is very story heavy, and you want to make progression because you want to see what happens next, then it makes a lot more sense to have difficulty settings, because you don't want to keep people from seeing the story that you're trying to tell necessarily. So I think about something like The Last of Us 2, which we already talked about. Incredible story in that game. Makes a lot of sense that you would have difficulty settings versus another game that may be like just pure gameplay, where I guess you could dumb it down, but maybe it wouldn't make as much sense to do that if it was more of a challenge type game.
Yeah,
Right.
I think a lot of platformers are kind of known for being difficult. So I think in some games I expect that level of difficulty. And in terms of, if you're having a conversation, right? So let's say that Bloodborne did have a difficulty setting, and I played on the easiest and Julia played on the hardest. Those are two incredibly different experiences. So I think Julia really hit the nail on the head. For me, a developer's vision is a developer's vision. So as a gamer, I go into that first playthrough leaving everything on default. The way they've mapped the buttons out, the way they've decided to make the difficulty, the OST, everything in it is what's supposed to give me that immersion. And I am a big fan of that, and letting them tell that vision through that medium the way they want to. But on the accessibility front, I do want to see every game be able to be played by roughly 20%. Roughly 20% of game consumers have some type of impairment or disability, and a lot of times that's motor function. So if somebody has a motor function impairment, they may not ever get the chance to play. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like, I mean,
Right. Like, even though I can absolutely understand the motor function impaired, I understand that. But on the other hand, like you said, it is a double-edged sword, because I think that it I don't think that it's I think it's okay to say that every game is not for everybody. If someone doesn't like platformers and you play a platformer, you're probably not going to enjoy it. And I don't think that it's okay for you to be like, I don't like this platformer. Can we make it not a platformer? So if the whole point of the game is to be challenge based, I think it should stay the original vision. And there are other nuances to that we can also talk about, like the community. Like a lot of those super hard games, it is incredibly rewarding to go to the community and be like, guys, I beat it. I beat this level, and everybody had the exact same experience as you. So they can be like, I totally know what you're talking about. I understand your victory. Isn't that awesome? And you get this incredible feeling of community and wholeness. And I love that about challenge-based games. And that's why they're some of my favorites. And it's why I kind of don't think that they should have a difficulty setting.
I can agree with you there. I think we're all and I think Matt and I sound like we're people who don't immediately jump into a game going like, punish me, daddy. Like, we want to have a good time first. And then Wesley and Julia, you two kind of sound like you're like, give it to me. I'm going to shred this shit. So I like having the dichotomy there in our opinions, but I think we all might kind of be on the same page that it's the developer's option to decide how they want to tell that story.
So I had a couple of thoughts about this, because I know this is kind of a sensitive subject. A lot of people get very passionate when this subject's brought up, and I don't want to be insensitive to anybody's feelings on the topic. I was thinking about this earlier and just trying to think how you could maybe maintain that like that sense of, like what Julie mentioned, that sense of community, that sense of pride about beating the game, living up to the challenge, while also maybe like meeting halfway in the middle with the other folks that maybe want to experience the game, but maybe don't want to put in the time to play it on that challenging level. I was reading a really interesting article. Have you guys played Control?
I played here and there. Yeah, it was a PlayStation Plus game.
It was on PlayStation Plus. Yeah, that's a game by Remedy. It's a third-person shooter. When that game originally released, it was you get what you get. There was no difficulty settings, and it was a fairly challenging game. Definitely didn't hold your hand in a lot of ways. So when it first released, that's the way it was. But later down the line, about a year later after it released, they patched it and they added a lot of difficulty tweaks to it so that you could adjust the difficulty. So I was thinking, like, and I would be interested to know what you guys think about this idea. Like, if more developers kind of came in later on after initial release, after everybody, let's say the hardcore folks had a chance to experience that game, the game's had its chance to be known for what it is, right? It's a hard game, it's a challenging game. But later on, the devs come in and they add in additional options to make the game easier. It wouldn't necessarily take away from that initial challenge from when the game first released, and you can always play the game that way. It'll still be known for that, right? But if people wanted to come in later and they added that in, that might be a good way for other people to be able to experience it after the fact. What do you think about that idea?
You know what? I remember when I was listening to Jordan, and he was saying that he just was not enjoying his time with Returnal because it was kicking your butt, and you're just like, this is just frustrating. This isn't even fun anymore. Like, I even understand that feeling too, because when I was playing Bloodborne, it took me several times of just, like, I just nuked the game. I restarted that game at least 3 times because I'm like, I rage quit like 3 times, and when I came back, I'm like, where the hell am I? Where am I going? What am I doing? Like, I don't know where I'm going. And I'm just like, I might as well just start over. But it got to the point where, like, it was not fun for me sometimes. But, like, that was, like, the beginning stage of it. You know, when I didn't quite put the dedication into the controls. And you still were in that beginning stage of the game where you feel weak and everything feels insurmountable and it's just nothing feels fun. But when you do put the time in, and by the way, I always suggest, like, if it has a multiplayer function to it, to play with friends or to find people to play with, because that's also a fantastic experience. And it helps you too. Like, if you're not great at the game and you need help understanding the controls or how to find the weakness in a boss, like, definitely seek out to your community. But I totally understand, like, the frustration aspect of it too.
I first got that when I want to say I was 7 when I started Rage. Remember, anybody remember Ninja Gaiden?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh,
Hard. I want to say I was about 7 and I finally beat that game, and it took me forever. And the sense of accomplishment at only 7 was like fucking A, like I just did this shit. So I
You
do,
knew you're making people cry.
yeah, I do see that, and I'm thinking to myself, like, if I beat it really hard and then these people come in and beat it easier, does that take away my? I mean, I don't know the answer to these questions. I'm just kind of thinking out loud on it, but I don't. Do you think that it would change, like for you guys? Would it change that sense of accomplishment for you? Do you think, or would it somehow change the integrity of the original challenge in some way?
I think that it might breed some kind of form of elitism, being like, oh yeah, well, I beat it when it was really hard.
I
Right.
right.
Get good.
Get
That
good.
that classic line.
I hate.
The other thing that I was thinking about beyond that was also dynamic difficulty settings. So if the game reacts to how you're playing. So
Like the Outer Worlds.
yeah, so if you're really kicking butt, maybe the game increases its own difficulty setting. And if you're really having a hard time, the game will automatically kind of like scale down to make it a little bit easier for you to get through to the next checkpoint, or make a
I
little
like.
progression. And that way there is maybe necessarily no difficulty setting, but the game kind of like just does it behind the scenes, and everybody kind of plays at their own level and enjoys the game at that level.
Are there any games that are effectively leveraging that?
Well, I think not exactly the way that Wes has described it, but the reason I said the Outer Worlds is like that reminds me of like you're taking too many laser damage from robots. Now you're gonna have a fear, like you're gonna have a fear to robots, so you're not gonna be as effective against them. So that's like
Oh,
one way of like the game reacting to how you're playing it and like kind of making it more difficult for you.
I
But it's
got
all
you.
optional.
That was actually Obsidian did an awesome job adding that in there. The programming for what you're describing, Leslie, that's a really hard one. Because when
I'd
you're
have
changing,
to I'd have to look it up because this it's not something that just came to me automatically. I'm pretty sure I've seen that somewhere before. I just don't know which game it's in off the
I
top.
thought I thought I had read it. It is somewhere, but I don't know what game it's in. But that's a lot of, when you look at accessibility options and even changing difficulty scaling up and down, that's a lot of extra programming work, coding work. I mean, that's money. So part of me, I mean, so our games like Demon Souls and Bloodborne is part of the reason they're doing that. Maybe money based, like we're just going to make it really hard and grueling, and then we only have to do it
Well,
one
I think
time. Or
I think when you think about money though, you have to think about your audience base. So usually when you have these kind of more hardcore games, those, like we talked about designers intent, those people are designing those games specifically for a certain market. When you're talking about broad appeal, you want to make a game that's more accessible to people. So in my mind, it's kind of worthwhile for the developers to spend that time and spend that money to make that game more broadly appealing to a wider audience.
how well does anybody know the numbers? Like how well, because if you look at like Bloodborne or Demon Souls or even Control prior, right, to the changes, they didn't make the extra investments there and they catered to a niche audience. So does anybody happen to know like how well those games, I mean, were they a huge success or do they have a relatively smaller?
I think they were pretty successful.
I mean,
I mean, Bloodborne was a huge hit for Sony, right? Um, it was a Sony exclusive, so it
it
really
was.
got that. It really got that kind of marketing oomph behind it.
Dark Souls was also a sleeper. Like, I vividly remember picking Dark Souls up, I think in 2013 maybe, and it was $15. Like it was in GameStop, and it was like on sale, and it was low. The price was really low. And then something happened, a cult following happened, and suddenly it was like the hottest game ever, like years after it had released, you know?
So then, yeah, it sounds like they've done well then. So I guess consumers have kind of then proven you can make a game that's really challenging that we will still, I mean, look at Returnal. Returnal did really well. I don't think people knew it was going to be quite this hard, but I think as consumers, we've kind of talked enough with our wallets to say, yeah, you can make a really challenging game and we'll support it because we want that feeling of like, I beat it. Which
Yeah,
God of War, that freaking Valkyrie Queen. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I
yes,
was
I do.
yeah, that first playthrough, I was like, I gotta walk away from this bitch because I'm gonna break everything in this living room. Like she made me rage, and then I had to go grind and get that damn armor. I was like, I'm putting this shit to easy, and she was still, But let's say again, I beat that there, which was still challenging. But if Julia had beat that on whatever ungodly difficulty they came up with on that one, which was really freaking hard, that is a drastically different.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. In the community, a victory is still a victory, and we should all be happy for that. But it is very different, the mentality of like, that the Orphan of Kos is really freaking hard, and like, you know what I mean? Like it's the same.
Oh god. Honestly, it would just it would almost feel like I was cheated. Like I had to do it the hard way. It's not fair that you have to do it, that you can get it done in a night. Meanwhile, I took several nights, several hours of multiple days with help. With help.
Yeah. So then, do you think, reverting back to right, like to what Matt said, that get good crowd is so? I think it's okay to be more to be very proud of an accomplishment, but like where are the lines that we have to draw? I mean, because we don't want to be turds about it, right? I mean,
Right.
by
Absolutely.
by
I don't like the we'll just get good kind of thing. I mean, yes, you should put the time in to like understand the game and understand the bosses and the enemies so that you can time it, you know? But I'm always going to be supportive of people that are like struggling, you know? I'm always going to be like, well, this is what I did. Maybe I can help you by telling you the strategies that I used. And I love that community support for like really hard games, and it's just like I just want to help you.
yeah, and I think we're seeing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, part of it is an attitude problem. Because people do kind of end up getting kind of this elitist attitude about some of this stuff. And it's awesome that people do awesome stuff in games. I am not what I would say a super skilled gamer. I do enjoy playing some challenging games, but I'm not one of those people that are out there wrecking trophies left and right for, clearing games through and doing all this crazy stuff. And, if you are that type of person, hey, my hat's off to you. Awesome. But, a lot of people kind of wear that and have kind of a chip on their shoulder about it, rather than being supportive and encouraging to new people who are trying to get their bearings in those games. Like Julie was saying, like, I think people just generally need to maybe be a little bit more inviting about these games that they love. If you really want other people to try them and you really want to support them, have more people play them, help other people play them, help other people, get into them. I have a friend right now who's playing Sekiro for the first time, and we just got him into FromSoft games last year. They were not his bag before, but we gave him a ton of encouragement with that. And now he's moved on to Sekiro, and he's having a good time with it. It's challenging him, but we're all like giving him tips, giving him encouragement. Hey, you can do this. I know you got it. Hey, I struggled with this guy for like 3 days. Don't worry about it if it takes you a little while. it took me a full week to finish the last boss of Sekiro. I did it, but man, it was probably the hardest boss I've ever actually beaten. And having somebody in my corner like encouraging me would have helped a lot. Instead of
Yeah,
beating my head against the wall by myself. So
some empathy,
yeah,
some
absolutely.
humanization towards your fellow gamers. It's like, so with Bloodborne, it's probably my favorite game of all time, but I'm not good at it. But I did beat it, and I loved it, and it's Lovecraftian, and it's beautiful, and it's wonderful. And that's another thing that I want to touch on is like, you don't have to be good at games to complete a game. There was this big debacle, I think, about a week ago with reviewers, professional game reviewers, and them saying like they didn't complete a game and they thought that that was totally fine. That they put out a professional game review and did not complete the game and didn't specify, that. I mean, I can even respect saying I didn't complete this game because it was really hard, and this is a review in progress kind of a thing. That's respectable when you are upfront and honest about that. But to put a professional game review that actually brings down the score when unfortunately people rely on that religiously sometimes, just kind of like how movie critics won't watch a movie if it's not critically acclaimed. Those things matter. It matters, especially if you are a professional game reviewer, and you don't have to be good at all games to be a game reviewer or to finish a game.
No, and that brings up a great segue into another part of the conversation for everybody. Do you think these games that are very challenging in nature, that don't have these difficulty settings, how much do you think it affects the reviews and possibly the sales? Could these how much do we think consumers are maybe not buying the game or unfairly judging the game without playing it because somebody said, well, this game is bad because it's too hard?
Um,
So I think that um, with those kinds of things, it's kind of like, let's say, a food critic, right? People have their own biases. And when you are a professional and you're being paid to tell if something is good or if it's bad, you have to put aside your personal biases and at least be able to appreciate certain mechanics, certain things that go into a product. If you personally don't like RPGs, but you are reviewing an RPG, you should try to set aside your personal biases. And that is so hard. I know it's hard, but you need to try. If it's your job, you need to try.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can pretty much agree there. Matt, did you?
Yeah, I think you gave me a thought of something I was thinking about. I think that there's a difference between maybe how much a Sony, like a PlayStation person, would rely on reviews and how much an Xbox person with Game Pass might rely on reviews. Because with Game Pass, you might just hop into any game on that's available in that library, no matter the review score, and just be like, "Oh, this got a great review. I'm going to go ahead and buy it." But with myself, though, I spent full price on Returnal. I'm not loving it. And now I feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have bought it, but I'm not loving it. If I were on Game Pass, and no, I know it's a Sony exclusive, but say I were on Games Pass, I wouldn't feel as bad about like, that's $15 a month that I'm paying anyway to play these games. So I think it's like, it's already come up that, a lot of times it's a double-edged sword, but I think it's another instance of that.
I think that's a
Yeah.
really good example, and that makes me want. I feel like many years ago, a lot more games had demos. Like back in the day, you could get a little demo disc to pop into the PlayStation 1 that had like 6 or 7 different games. We don't see that anymore. So what are you guys' thoughts on, do you think demos would be a more effective way to let consumers see, or would really challenging games be completely hindered by a demo because people are going to go, this is hard, and I'm not, like what Julia's saying, I'm not going to buy into what I need to do to beat this?
I think developers have to be careful with demos. I personally would love to see the return of the demo, and there are still a lot of game demos that are coming out. If you're playing on Switch, Switch has a lot of demos for their games. Um, but as a developer, I think you do have to be a little bit careful about what you're putting out before the game is ready, because you also don't want to turn your audience off before the full release is out. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a demo, but I can see it from the dev's point of view, where if you're putting out like a vertical slice or something that may not be fully representative of the whole experience, then I think that they may be a little cagey about that.
Especially
But
with a board game, I can see that, because you're
if
not.
if you are going to do a demo, I would recommend like making it available permanently and not like for 1 hour at 3 p.m. On a Tuesday or something like Resident Evil 8 did.
Yeah, or like Resident Evil 2, like you only could go through it once, and it was like you can only, that's it. That's all you could do. I remember that because I played the demo for Resident Evil 2, and it was only with a limited run. You could only,
it was called the one-shot demo, I think.
Yes.
That's like not even a sample. That's like, here, you have the spoon to lick.
Yeah. But if it's a really hard game, you don't get all the effort and the strategy that's leading up to that point. So I would think if it is a hard game without those settings, that it could be hindered significantly by a demo. At least I'm guessing.
Yeah, you were mentioning earlier about reviews and the role that they play. I think there's a couple of things about that. We as gamers today have more access to information about games before they release than we ever have. I remember growing up as a kid, I had Nintendo Power Magazine. That's as much information as I got about any games before they were released, including the release date. So most of the time I didn't even know when stuff was coming out. I just stare at a picture saying this is coming from Japan at some unknown point in the future, right? But today we have awesome video reviews, we have previews, we've got gameplay footage, we've got a ton of information available to us before we buy the game. So I think part of being a savvy consumer is doing your research before you buy into a game. And if you see a bunch of reviews that are either side, whether they're glowing reviews or whether they're terrible reviews, I still think it's up to the consumer to understand what kind of game it is, watch some gameplay, check it out for yourself, make your own decision. Also, I kind of feel like if you've been in this space long enough and you are paying attention to reviews, you know which outlets and which reviewers kind of like jive with your tastes. So you can kind of like tailor your experience to what, a reviewer that you trust says about a game. So potentially, if you're talking about a person that plays 3 video games a year and doesn't really pay attention to anything, then yeah, it could maybe hurt things. But for most of us, I think we need to kind of do our homework too and know what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, that actually maybe throughout the conversation, I've actually just had a couple of thoughts that I've jotted down. One of the ones we said about like for the people maybe who like are motor impaired, that Mortal Kombat 11 tutorial was so difficult. And unneededly difficult. Why is the tutorial so difficult? Like people, I was reading Reddit forums where people were literally having this guy go into like game share for them and beat the tutorial for them. And like I was able to get through it, but like for people who can't hit the buttons that quickly, Mortal Kombat's probably a very difficult game for them. And another one I thought of while we were talking was for platformers. I don't think the Crash Bandicoot remaster had difficulty settings, and they took Crash from. They didn't like take Crash from Crash 1. They took the Crash from like other games and put him into Crash 1. So he jumps different than the way the game was designed. So he'll over jump really easily. And my wife and I have been playing that one since it came out. Like I won't let her get to Crash 2 until she beats Crash 1. But it's been a slog.
Yeah, we have the I still haven't beat It's About Time yet. Like it's just, but that's what platformers are, right? You die and die and die. And I hate setting a game down. I hate like moving on to the next before I beat it. But I had to for like my blood pressure. And I might have a stroke if I sat there and tried to beat. And yeah, that doesn't have a difficulty setting, but that brings up a great, just got an idea. If a game is fun, the difficulty doesn't feel as challenging, at least to me. So if I say like Crash Bandicoot is hard, right? Or Ninja Gaiden was hard. Battletoads was so hard. Never beat Battletoads.
Most people never beat Battletoads.
Dude, I feel like it's been 50 years later and I haven't beaten Battletoads, but it's so fun. The difficulty doesn't bother me. But then I played games like Oddworld Soulstorm, and I said, I'm just not enjoying the mechanics in the story, so the difficulty feels a lot harder. So what did, like, you guys want to kind of chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not having fun, then it's going to be a slog, whether it's easy or not, right? That's
Does that
what I
make any
think.
games come to mind for you guys? Like, are there any times where you feel like you've experienced that, where people said, "Oh, this game's really hard," but well, I mean, Bloodborne is really hard, and Julia said, "I'm not." She
You
said
know,
she's not good at it, which isn't
I've
true.
got a good example of this actually. Doom Eternal. A
Oh,
lot of people love Doom Eternal, and you know what? I am so happy that because I recognize the quality in that game. It is a quality shooter, but I do not have fun playing that game. It is just a constant state of tension, and I'm not really good at shooters. So that's one of those games where I was glad that it had difficulty settings because I had to bump that baby down. I got through it, but I was playing on little boy baby mode. Please help me get through this. And
a couple years
and it was just even on that mode, it was a schlag getting through, and I just pushed through because I wanted to see how it wrapped up. But I didn't have a good time, and it made it worse. It was a worse experience for it. I really liked the Doom 2016 a lot more than I liked Eternal.
That sounds like Returnal for me, where like I can totally see that it's like, the haptic feedback on that DualSense is great. It's like, it looks beautiful, it plays great, but really just the difficulty where I keep dying and dying and dying, and then like the way that it was designed, where the maps are always different. I just can't get used to I can't get used to how it's going to play, so I can't anticipate like what to expect next. So I think that one is one that is a little too difficult. Maybe it's just me, but I think it's a little too difficult.
It almost sounds like all the stuff we're talking about means that if you're a developer and you're going to make a really challenging game that doesn't have difficulty settings, you have to make a good quality game. Because if it's boring, or the mechanics are bad, or the story's bad because it's so hard, is that safe to kind of assume we're going to lose interest?
And it also depends on how you personally play a game too, like whether or not it's difficult or not. I've heard from several people that they played Dark Souls and that was really hard for them, but then they went into something like Bloodborne. They're like, "Oh, it was the easiest thing ever," and I'm like, "Okay, okay." And then it's the opposite for some people. Dark Souls was pretty easy for me, but Bloodborne, just
You bring up a good point. I mean, every game is different, right? So that's, even if the same developer makes different games I mean, like Uncharted, right? All of those were kind of different, even though some of the mechanics were the same. So I definitely see what you're saying there. What do you guys think of FromSoft is making Elden Ring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you think that's gonna have a difficulty setting, or is Elden Ring gonna be like an out of this world, really hard RPG?
I doubt that it will have a difficulty setting. Personally, I think that From Software, they know what kind of games that they make, and they know what kind of an audience that they cater to. And I think that there was a lot of blowback when I was reading an interview. It was from a long time ago. I think it was for one of the Souls games after the Souls had already come out, and Miyazaki was talking about, I think it was in 2012 for the original Dark Souls. He was talking about maybe wanting to go back and add in a difficulty slider, like I was talking about before, and he got a lot of blowback from the community for that, for wanting to do that. So I would be surprised if that happened.
Really? Because like the RPG community is so drastically different from the niche community of like, I want those punishing, really technically precise hard.
I mean,
games.
technically,
so,
Souls is an RPG.
Yeah,
it's an action RPG.
It is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, shit. Okay.
So
then you guys.
The advantage of a game like Souls, or I guess it depends on what RPG elements they include, right? Because Souls and Bloodborne were action RPGs. You could grind in those games, and you can level up, and you can technically make things easier if you want to spend the time. Whereas a game like Sekiro was pretty much just a sheer action game. There were ways that you could increase your health and stuff as you progress through the game, but
True.
you couldn't grind in that game at all. It was you're very capped on what kind of progression you make as you move through the story.
That's true. That is a good point that I didn't think about. The progression system would drastically change. So what Julia got really excited when I brought up Elden Ring. I just want to point that out. Like,
I am so excited for Elden Ring. I am probably going to take off some vacation from work to play that game.
yes.
Oh my God. It's going to be a vacation. It's going to be beautiful. Love it.
What do we think? Like, what do you guys? Do you have like any thought? Like, what do you think it's going to be like or look like, or what do you? I mean, well, we know we don't know anything, but like, what do you guys?
So I'm exceedingly excited about it because the way that Miyazaki works is he has a formula, right? Anyone that's played through Demon Souls, then to Dark Souls, then to Dark Souls 2 and 3 and Bloodborne, you know that he has a formula. And he progressively gets better at this formula, right? And he just adds on to it or gets rid of things that didn't work and adds things that he knows are going to work better. And I'm just so excited for it because he just does such a great job. He does. Like, it's amazing. So I can't wait to see like the pinnacle. Like, I thought Bloodborne was the pinnacle, but now it's like the stakes are even higher.
Matt, what do you think as somebody who's a little more like, well, I'm on the casual side and I want to enjoy it and kind of get into the narrative. Is it a little bit of a turnoff for you to go, oh, Elden Ring looks cool, but it's from software and it might be really hard and it might not be the kind of difficulty that I typically tend to enjoy?
Yeah, I would definitely say that might be one that I would wait for a sale on. I don't typically play from software games. I bought Bloodborne on a sale on when it was like $10, so I was enjoying that. I did get Demon Souls at launch, and then I read online that if you did the class, I think it's like the noble class that like has the wand, like where it gives you effectively like like far range combat, like long range combat. I heard that that's like essentially kind of like their easy mode, especially like in the beginning where like you can choose to like one kill the lower level enemies.
Makes it easier for sure.
Yeah.
Soul Arrow for the win.
Yeah.
So back in the day when I first played Dark Souls, I had just come off the Skyrim train, and I'm like, oh, I'll just play a thief. It's fine. That was like the worst decision I ever made. I was grinding until level 30 at the gargoyles. It was bad.
I actually don't enjoy those games. I do not. I have this thing with haunted houses. Don't bother me. Scary movies. Don't bother me. If I have a remote in my hand and I'm like the person making the thing happen, I can't even do a little bit scary. I don't like creatures. I don't like killing things that aren't like, give me humans all day long. I don't give it, but I don't like creepy. I don't like horror. I don't even like that, like Hellblade, like that. Oh God, am I going to drop into combat with no HUD? Like, I don't like that tension feeling, but I love RPGs. So I'm very like, I don't know what to do about Elden Ring. I don't know how I feel.
I don't know if any of you know. Well, I don't know if any of you played PT. Did any of you play PT?
I
I know
missed
what
it.
you're talking about.
That was nuts. That was like the scariest experience like in video games. You know.
I have a friend that keeps his PS4 just because it has PT on it.
My husband does that too. He's like, this is going to be worth a lot of money someday.
Yeah.
Is it just like horror scary or like?
So
No, it's a horror game.
P stands for playable trailer, and Hideo Kojima came out with it because he was toying with the idea of making a Silent Hill. But this was before he got axed. So this was it was a project he was working on. So he was making a horror kind of thing. It was the first of its kind though. And after the project got axed, so did PT. So you can't download it, you can't get it anywhere. And so if you have it on your console, that's it.
Wow.
That with Norman Reedus, isn't he the actor in that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Really?
makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense because they did
Twice?
Death Stranding together. So
Yeah, it was Norman Reedus and Kojima were trying to do a project together for a while. They ended up doing Death Stranding finally, but originally they were trying to pull Norman Reedus into the Silent Hills, what was going to be Silent Hills, and so if you beat the
I'm
PT,
still holding out hope that something like that happens because, oh my god, Kojima can do horror. Like, that's good. That stuff was really good.
yeah, I'm of the opinion that Konami in general just needs to
Crystal's like,
sell their IP. Please give me a new Castlevania. Give
Which
me a
one
new
had-
Silent Hill.
One of them had the big spider. I like my friend because one of my neighbors has a PlayStation, and then my other buddy's got an X. So we're always like, "Oh, try this game, play this game," and we do game nights, and we're always trying different stuff. One of those Souls games has a Crystal does not do spiders, and
A lot of them have big spiders.
No, I mean I squalled. I absolutely not. I was like, no, I'm not touching. I'm not gonna lie, zombies not my thing. So I was very hesitant about The Last of Us. I was like, I don't know. Like Crystal's chicken shit, y'all. When it comes to games, like that Rat King.
Oh my god!
I don't know. It all happened really fast.
That was the best
Somehow-
boss fight of last year, in my opinion.
Somehow, like in the blink of an eye, I went from staring this mofo in the face to activating photo mode, punching my wife, and kicking my puppy. Like I don't even know. I mean, I just like I panic when it's
And he wouldn't die. He just
when
wouldn't go
it's a-
down.
creepy. I don't. Ooh,
That was a tense fight for sure.
I
Yep.
actually have a question. So I think this isn't something that's in The Last of Us. What do you guys think of like instant death, where like you only get one chance to die? Like I think in the hardest mode of The Last of Us, is if you die once, the game restarts. Maybe I'm inaccurate on that, but
Grounded and shit. What's it called? What's the mode called where permadeath?
Permadeath. That's what I meant.
Yeah,
permadeath.
grounded and permadeath don't have to be set on together, so you can play permadeath on any difficulty. You don't have to play it on grounded. I wouldn't suggest to play. I was like, yeah, I'll try that on a 2 seconds. Like, nope, change that. I made it all the way to on normal every time. The damn where Abby's got a balance on the thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Towards the end of the
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
Why can't? That's as simple as it is. Why can't I do that every time? Like, screw it. I'm not beating this on permadeath. This is bull crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of those modes personally. I think they can be fun. Like in Devil May Cry, you have Heaven and Hell mode, which is basically like instant death for you, but also instant death for the enemies. So it's like whoever gets hit first dies. So that can be fun as like I've beaten this game like at least a couple of times and I want to mess around. But generally, that's not for me.
Are you playing Returnal then? Because I know that's the roguelite aspect of that is excruciatingly
I
frustrating.
am, but I don't die in one hit in that game. So
That's true. Okay, you last.
Thankfully.
Julia, are you playing Returnal?
I desperately want to play Returnal because I've seen all my friends. My whole Twitter feed is lit up with Returnal content, and it just looks so much fun. Boki was actually talking to me about it. He's like, I want that experience for you. I'm like, I do too. But we only have one PS5 in the house, and currently my husband is playing through Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and he is the biggest Mass Effect fan. Like, he's a huge fan. So he's doing that right now. And I'm waiting my turn for Returnal.
I
You might be the second. I'm sorry, he might be the second Mass. I might be the number one Mass Effect fan. So he might be the second.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Did you get your helmet?
No, I did not.
Did you get the big edition?
No, I just went for the digital.
Okay.
Yeah.
He got
Yeah.
both of them. He got the digital and he
then.
got the physical. So I
Prove
guess
your own.
the Amazon order was running late, and so he's like, "I have to play it tonight, Julia. I have to play it tonight." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "I'm gonna buy it digitally."
how does that dynamic work? I mean, my wife plays games, but not like I play games. I'm like I will pretend to be dead to not go out with you on a Saturday night if there's a new game that came out. Like, I'm just not gonna lie. Like, that's my level of games. And she's like, she can carry her Nintendo Switch and play Animal Crossing anywhere that she goes. So we don't typically fight for TV time all the time. So how does it work in a household with a dynamic of two hardcore gamers that are sharing a system and a TV? Like, do you literally just go, I have like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you have like, is it like
So
that?
we have two TVs. There's one in here and there's one in the other room. So the dining room is my shop. I'm a jeweler, as I said. So my shop is in there, my TV is in there, my console, all my games, they're all in there. And then he has his stuff in the living room right here with the PS5. And of course, right now there's a shortage in the materials to make PS5s, so it's constantly sold out. So we only have one right now. But generally speaking, we would have bought two of them.
I probably would have bought two of them, and that's just me. So I would have a back of my, you want to watch your TV show? Okay, go to the other room. Sweet. Well, I think we're probably pretty close to wrapping up. I know I could talk with these guys all night, so I think we're gonna close the recording down here soon. But what are the final thoughts that you guys have on the topic that we discussed today?
Sure, yeah, I'll go first. I think that generally, I think difficulty settings should be a thing. I think that at the beginning of the podcast we mentioned accessibility and difficulty settings are kind of two different things, but I do think that difficulty settings make games more accessible, and I think that generally it's something that I like to see. And I think honestly, IO Interactive Hitman, I think that is the best instance of difficulty settings, because if you want, you can go on the hardest difficulty, you can do the thing where you only get one save file, or you can play like me, play on normal, and you can try to go silent suit assassin. You can try to not change your disguise at all. You can try to not get any other kills, or you can try to go for the scripted moments and enjoy the story, the more story-based stuff. So I think, to speak for myself, I find that I don't want to get frustrated with my games. I don't want to have the feeling like I want to break my controller. I want to have the feeling like I'm doing something good with my time. Like I'm enjoying myself, like I'm relaxing, and like I'm not being frustrated. I work to be frustrated. I don't play video games to be frustrated.
Wesley?
Well, like I said, I think that this is an issue that devs need to start thinking about and how they're going to tackle, because obviously it is a point of contention with people. I think there's definitely an audience that seeks that challenge and is looking for those challenging games, and I do think that there's certain games that are intended to be played that way, and I don't think that devs should be necessarily restricted to forcing them into having these different modes. I think that difficulty modes have a place in most games, in probably maybe even 98% of games. But there's definitely some experiences that it just doesn't fit with. I think of, you think about MMOs, you think about MOBAs. I don't think those have difficulty settings necessarily, and those are largely like, player versus player type experiences, so it's harder to implement. But you would never really probably suggest that somebody do something like that. So why can't we have a couple of single player games that challenge people? That being said, like I mentioned, there's things that you can do. I think maybe releasing modes after the fact, 1-2 years after the game comes out, or like we talked about, dynamic difficulty scaling. Those are maybe some ways that you can deal with that issue, but in general, I think people just need to be a little bit more kind with each other when it comes to the issue, and people get heated real quickly, and everybody enjoys playing games, whether they're hard or they're easy, and so just let people enjoy the games the way that they want to enjoy them. And if you come across a game that looks interesting, but maybe a little bit difficult, spend the time and get good and learn how to play the game. And if it's not worth your time, then find something that is worth your time. I guess that's my general opinion. But be kind to each other.
He get good at us. He get
Right.
good at us.
I heard.
Everybody heard that? He just get good at us.
I know. I heard it. I was looking at your face
slip
like
of the lip. Slip of the lip.
I was like, Julia, I want to close us out.
But in general, I do agree with everybody's point of view, because of course I can absolutely see how difficulty settings are important to people. And I think for most games, it's important to have a difficulty setting, but there are just some games that the whole point is to be challenge based. And I think it's important to be kind to each other and be helpful in those challenge based games that are intended to be played that way. And I respect the original vision of what the developers wanted us to experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Enjoy gaming the way that you like to enjoy it, and be good to everybody else and let them enjoy it the way that they want to enjoy it. So again, thank you so much, Julia, Matt, and Wesley, for coming on the show. Hopefully you guys will see these fine faces again, and love to have them back on. And thanks so much for watching episode 4. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.